from Colorado, had to be the lobbyists because they got paid a lot of money to orchestrate not just the House Bill 687, but the folks there. I don't know where they parked the buses, but they brought Ms. Watts in and her group. And some of the legislators down at the table who have been longtime supporters of the Women's Defense League were wearing them. Well, she decides, that, oh my God, they're mocking women whose children have died and making fun of women, accusing them of clutching their pearls when they get in distress and this and that. And of course, neither Democrats nor progressives nationally or in New Hampshire do any homework and basically repeat what they're told.
Well, she is basically bought and paid for by former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Correct.
This is her job, is to cast aspersions
Yes.
on those who believe in their constitutional rights.
Yes.
And she will do anything that she can. And in this case, she made it go national. And she thought that it was going to go national by basically saying, look at these unfair representatives, forgetting for the moment that there are no hooks in the area where the representatives go before coming into the hall that says, check your First Amendment rights here.
I think there's one now with Democrat control, but I haven't looked.
Yeah, well, they're certainly trying to do that.
Well,
there was a video yesterday that I'll be posting about later on that's to exactly that point. But in effect, it went national. But it seems to have backfired on Mom's Demand Action, hasn't it?
It has, and part of it, I think she really miscalculated by not going after women. Okay? Because oh my goodness, who could ever think that women could have a different view than the left or the progressives? So rather than have the courage to come after us head on, all right, as women who insist that women are smart enough, capable enough, strong enough, willing enough to defend themselves and insist that they are able to defend themselves. The victim traffickers that are part of Mom's Demand and the New Hampshire Domestic Violence Coalition, women who traffic in victims, okay, instead went after men. Because, oh my gosh, men are oppressing them, and who's gonna question that, right?
Well, it is part and parcel of the victimization mantra of the left, where they have to be oppressed, and the bigger the victim they can make themselves out to be, the more moral high ground they hold, which I think the right is starting to say, enough of this, we're not putting up with it. So what happened?
Well, what happened is a number of the representatives who were demonized said, no, that has nothing to do with it. For years, we have supported the Women's Defense League, and the pearls symbolize the Women's Defense League, and we are here as a show of support to the Women's Defense League. The only one that didn't was Dennis Fields, and he's like, well, I don't know, they just gave me a string of beads. But that's neither here nor there, okay? There's neither here nor there. But these were principled men, okay, who had a different opinion on the legislation, but more importantly, were supporting the Women's Defense League and our right to have a different opinion than Ms. Watts and her coven. So
coven, I like that word. It is appropriate.
It's a great word.
And if they don't like what I'm saying, we can have that discussion. I'm happy to have that discussion.
We certainly can. And so it ended up backfiring. People all over the country began contacting the Women's Defense League. Second Amendment supporters, firearm supporters, women's organizations who support firearms and their own self-defense began wearing pearls. In Vermont and Maine, of all places, there were men attending hearings in trying to fight bad gun bills wearing a string of pearls. We ran out, okay? We've ordered more. People want pearls. They want the pink hats that we had at the rally as well.
Yes, and I have spotlighted those. Now, what Mrs. Olsen is talking about are not the pink pussycat or pussy hats from
Yes.
the Women's March.
Yes.
These were just regular ball caps, same color pink for the
Yes.
most part, and they have a logo on them.
Actually, it's not even a logo. It's just a lovely little graphic of a black rifle, and much the shape of this.
AR-15,
Correct.
which also has sent a lot of people. We're talking about 2-3 weeks ago now of the
2 weeks ago tomorrow, shockingly.
Yes, of the 5th annual Women's Defense League of New Hampshire
Correct.
gun rally.
Correct. Women's rights, gun rights are women's rights. Gun rights are everyone's rights. Okay. So it's sort of become that because the dispersion of support for this rally and for the work that we do has gone way beyond this women's organization, but to groups that work with us, who support our work, and we support theirs. So it's gun rights are everyone's rights.
So I'm glad to see at this point, because we still haven't gotten to the meat of why we're here.
Exactly.
But this is a good background.
Yeah.
So the politicization from the other side, the anti-gun, the civilian disarmament, the anti-constitutionalists, have really tried to politicize it in an effort to silence people.
Correct.
And I think that they ran into several buzzsaws that they didn't intend to.
I think you're right.
And I think they are still very upset that all of this has happened, which brings us to the real reason why we are here.
Right.
And it comes back to the hitting.
The executive
now-
session
except
on House
now-
Bill 687.
Yes, which now you're probably going to have to either put another logo of a butt doing a quick shake, because you were assaulted by New Hampshire State Rep. Debra Altschiller. And I believe that's how
Well,
it's pronounced.
I'm not sure that you can say that. I submitted a
You have
complaint.
allegedly.
I have submitted a complaint to the state police that on 2 occasions following that House Bill 687 executive session, where her bill, I'm not sure which version, which amendment in fact was even discussed, but ultimately the base bill was defeated on an ought to pass vote and sent to a retain vote unanimously.
And you can see this on Granite Rock,
Yes.
since I was there.
You
videoing
were
the whole
sitting right
thing.
next to me. Yeah.
And it was very surprising how many holes were punched into that bill by the Republicans, including those wearing pearls and supporters of the Women's Defense League. But
Correct.
more importantly, defending both the New Hampshire and the U.S. Constitution. Again, the word infringe was infringed upon.
Yeah.
And they pointed out, and I think most egregiously, that the bill could put somebody on the NICS list, which makes you a prohibited person, without due process, just at somebody's hearsay or say so, without a judge really playing much of a role, and never being able to get off the NICS because the bill so conveniently left that off. And there were a bunch of other things that went into that as well. But the Republicans in the minority, they were out, voted 12-8 on that committee, the Criminal Justice Committee in the New Hampshire State House. They successfully targeted and pulled the trigger on lots of problems on that, and it became clear, especially with people videoing the hearing, the executive session, not a hearing, that it was so flawed they had to retain it. They got embarrassed, and Representative Altschiller was sitting behind us when they called the vote. The people who were in favor of taking your gun rights away put out a motion to pass, which means going out of the committee and onto the floor for a full vote.
Correct. Before going to the Senate.
Right. And it failed in a tie. And I think it was 10-10 because
well, regardless, it failed.
It failed, and a couple of Democrats actually crossed the line and said, I cannot vote for this the way it is. The arguments were made true and were convincing. So it shows that Republicans, when they decide to actually stand up for what's right, can actually make a big difference.
And so can Democrats.
And Democrats.
And I
absolutely.
applaud those that had the courage to say, well, you know what? We don't know enough. We don't know enough about this to make a vote. We cannot vote on something we do not know. So rather than be Nancy Pelosi and say we have to pass it before we can see what's in it, these Democrats stood up and said no.
And they are to be applauded.
They are indeed to be applauded. In fact, I wrote them a thank you note.
Very good.
My mother taught me well.
Yes, she did. So the next motion was made by a Republican to retain.
Yeah.
And as you said, everybody retained.
It was unanimous.
Every person voted to retain. I was
Including the chair.
flabbergasted.
So was I.
I just couldn't believe what happened in the last 5 minutes of that executive session on it.
I couldn't either.
And that's when some other type of action started.
Well, after that, that was the last bill for that executive session. So the hearing was closed, the session was closed, and people start picking up and moving on either to go to lunch or back home, whatever it is that they're going to do. So the meeting was breaking up.
Croc TV.